At a family dinner, I dropped my fork. When I bent down, I saw my sister's husband's leg between my fiancé's under the table. I stood up, they froze. He looked at me and said, "Let's step outside for a few words." Then, the dinner was supposed to be harmless. That was the lie I told myself while driving over, the same lie I had been telling myself for months. Family dinners were noisy, awkward, and predictable, but they were safe. That night was meant to be a quiet checkpoint before the wedding, a chance for everyone to sit in one room and pretend things were stable. My parents' house was already full when we arrived. Coats piled on the entry bench, shoes scattered near the door, voices bleeding through the hallway. The smell of roasted meat and wine hung heavy in the air. My sister Paula was laughing too loudly in the kitchen, already a glass in. Her husband Kevin stood near her, relaxed, confident, leaning against the counter like he owned the place. Rena slipped her hand into mine as we walked in. She smiled the practiced smile she had been using lately, the one that never quite reached her eyes. I noticed it, filed it away, and ignored it. That was my first mistake of the evening, but not the last. The table was crowded. My parents sat at the head. Paula and Kevin took seats near the center. Rena and I sat across from them. Other relatives filled in the rest. Plates clinked. Glasses were poured. The room buzzed with overlapping conversations that never quite landed anywhere meaningful. Kevin kept looking at Rena. Not quick glances, not polite acknowledgments, but slow, deliberate looks. The kind that lingered a second too long. Each time I caught it, he shifted his eyes away without embarrassment. Rena did not look back at him directly, but she leaned subtly in his direction, her shoulder angled just enough to suggest awareness. I tried to focus on the food. I tried to listen to my father talking about work. I tried to stay present. My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against the plate, skidding off the table and onto the floor. I leaned down without thinking. Under the table, everything was clear. Kevin's leg was pressed firmly between Rena's legs. Not brushing. Not accidental. His knee was angled inward, his foot planted confidently. Rena's legs were parted just enough to allow it. Her foot hooked around the chair rung, like she was steadying herself. Neither of them moved when I bent down. That was the part that burned itself into my memory. They did not flinch. They did not pull away. They stayed exactly where they were, as if they were daring the world to notice. I straightened slowly, my hand still reaching for the fork that no longer mattered. My chair scraped loudly as I stood. The sound cut through the room and silenced half the conversations. Plates paused midair. My mother looked up, startled. Kevin looked at me calmly. Too calmly. He did not move his leg. He did not apologize. He met my eyes and tilted his head toward the back door, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He suggested we step outside for a few words, like this was a misunderstanding to be smoothed over. I nodded, not because I wanted privacy, but because I wanted witnesses to remember what came next. I walked toward the door without rushing. Behind me, Rena's chair shifted abruptly. I did not turn around. I did not need to. I already knew her face would be pale, her expression caught between panic and calculation. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. Kevin stepped onto the patio and closed the door behind us with his foot. He leaned against the railing, unbothered, confident in a way that only someone who thinks they have already won can be. He did not deny anything. He did not pretend it was a mistake. He told me it had been going on for months. He told me it was inevitable. He told me Rena had been unhappy longer than she let on. He told me I should have seen it coming. He smiled while he said it. That smile snapped something loose in me. Not rage. Not grief. Clarity. I did not swing at him. I did not shout. I did not make a scene outside where only the dark could see it. I turned, opened the door, and walked back into the dining room. Every conversation stopped when I returned alone. I did not sit back down. I stood at the end of the table and announced that the engagement was over. The words landed heavy and final. Chairs scraped again. Someone gasped. My mother froze mid-motion, her hand hovering above a serving dish. Rena stood up too quickly. Her mouth opened, then closed. Kevin followed a moment later, his face tightening for the first time that night. Paula looked between them, confused, then suspicious. She asked what was going on, her voice rising as the room leaned in. I told them exactly what I had seen under the table. I told them Kevin had confirmed it outside. I told them this was not new and not accidental. Rena tried to interrupt. She reached for my arm and missed. Her words stumbled over each other, excuses colliding before they could form. Kevin attempted to speak next. My father shut him down with a single raised hand. Paula turned on her husband, demanding an explanation. Kevin hesitated, just long enough to make the truth obvious. That hesitation detonated the room. My parents stood. Voices rose. Plates were abandoned. Someone knocked over a glass. Rena backed away from the table as if distance could undo what had already happened. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I told Rena she would not be coming home with me. I told her the wedding was canceled effective immediately. I told Kevin he was no longer welcome in my parents' house. Paula stared at me like she had been struck. Then she looked at Kevin again, really looked at him, and something hardened behind her eyes. Kevin tried to reach for her. She stepped back. The dinner ended without anyone formally ending it. People left in clusters, whispering. My parents sat in silence. Rena lingered near the doorway, waiting for a moment that never came. I walked out alone. Before I reached my car, I pulled out my phone and started undoing everything I had built around the lie of that relationship. Vendor calls, venue cancellation emails, account freezes. Every action was clean, deliberate, and irreversible. By the time I drove away, the wedding no longer existed. Inside the house, the damage was still unfolding. Outside, I was already moving on. The fork remained on the floor, exactly where it had fallen, and nothing would ever be put back the way it was. I did not go home. I drove for almost an hour without a destination, the streets blurring together while my phone vibrated non-stop in the passenger seat. I did not answer it. Every call could wait. Every message could rot. I needed space to think clearly, because what came next would shape everything. When I finally stopped, it was in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner off the highway. The kind of place that never closed because life never stopped ruining people at convenient hours. I sat there with the engine off, the radio silent, and let the adrenaline settle into something sharper. I did not feel shock anymore. I felt focus. My phone lit up again. This time it was my sister. Paula's voice cracked as soon as I answered. She asked where I was. She asked what the hell just happened. She asked questions that did not have clean answers. I told her I was fine. I told her she needed to listen carefully. I told her Kevin admitted everything outside before I said a word inside. I told her I was not guessing, exaggerating, or interpreting something wrong. There was a long pause on the line. Not confusion. Recognition. She told me Kevin had been distant for months. She told me he had been defensive, secretive, unpredictable. She told me she felt stupid saying it out loud now. I did not comfort her. Not because I did not care, but because this moment was already doing enough damage on its own. I told her to come stay with our parents that night. I told her not to be alone with him. She agreed immediately. When I hung up, I finally opened the messages. Rena had sent 27 texts and left 6 voicemails. The tone shifted rapidly from panic to anger to self-pity to bargaining. Kevin had sent 3 messages. I deleted his without reading them. I called my father next. He did not interrupt me once. When I finished, he told me Kevin had been escorted out of the house after I left. He told me Paula had locked herself in the guest room. He told me Rena had tried to stay, then left in tears when it became clear no one was interested in hearing explanations. That was enough confirmation. I thanked him and hung up. The revenge did not feel dramatic when it started. It felt procedural. I logged into the wedding portal and canceled the venue first. The deposit was non-refundable, but I did not care. The confirmation email arrived within minutes. I forwarded it to Rena without comment. Next came the caterer, then the photographer, then the planner. Each cancellation triggered automated notifications. Each one landed like a quiet explosion somewhere in Rena's world. I froze the joint account. I removed her access to my credit card. I changed passwords. None of it was illegal. All of it was overdue. I drove home just before dawn. Rena's car was already gone. The house felt hollow in a way I had never noticed before. Not sad. Empty. Like a stage after the actors leave. I slept for 3 hours. When I woke up, the fallout had multiplied. Paula called again. Her voice was steadier now, edged with something colder. Kevin had come by the house early that morning, furious, accusing her of humiliating him. He had demanded they talk privately. She refused. He left when my father threatened to call the police. She told me she was done. Not dramatic. Not screaming. Done in the way that only comes after clarity. By noon, Kevin was calling me again. This time I answered. He did not apologize. He accused me of overreacting. He accused me of destroying families over something that could have been handled quietly. He told me I was punishing everyone, not just him. I told him consequences were not punishments. I told him they were outcomes. He lost control then. His voice rose. He threatened me in vague, clumsy ways. He claimed he would tell people things about me. He claimed Rena would back him up. I hung up mid-sentence. An hour later, I got a call from a number I recognized immediately. Kevin's employer. I had referred him to that firm 2 years earlier. My name carried weight there. Not because I demanded it, but because I had earned it. They asked me if the rumors circulating that morning were true. I did not embellish. I did not editorialize. I confirmed what I knew and clarified that I no longer stood behind Kevin in any professional capacity. That was all they needed. By late afternoon, Kevin was suspended pending review. Rena showed up at the house just before sunset. She did not knock at first. She stood in the driveway, staring at the door as if it might open out of guilt. When she finally knocked, It was soft, careful, rehearsed. I opened the door and did not invite her in. She tried to speak immediately. She tried to explain without explaining. She tried to reframe the night as a misunderstanding fueled by emotions and alcohol. I stopped her. I told her to take her things and leave the keys on the counter. She asked where she was supposed to go. I told her that was no longer my concern. She cried then, loudly, uncontrolled, the kind of crying meant to overwhelm logic. It did not work. She accused me of abandoning her. She accused me of humiliating her. She accused me of caring more about my pride than our future. I told her she had already chosen a future. She just miscalculated the cost. She left an hour later with 2 suitcases and nothing else. The next day was worse. Word traveled fast through the family. Not rumors. Facts. Kevin tried to control the narrative, but he was always a half step behind. Every version of the story he told contradicted the last. Paula filed for separation before lunch. Kevin showed up at my office unannounced that afternoon. Security stopped him at the front desk. He demanded to see me. He shouted my name in the lobby like volume could restore power. I watched from the conference room window as he was escorted out. That should have been the end of it. It was not. That night, Rena posted a long message online. She did not name names, but she painted herself as confused, hurt, and unfairly discarded. She implied manipulation. She implied emotional neglect. She implied I had driven her elsewhere. It backfired almost immediately. People who had been at the dinner recognized the omissions. Paula's silence spoke louder than any rebuttal. Kevin's sudden disappearance from work did the rest. By morning, Rena had deleted the post. Kevin called again. This time he sounded desperate. He asked to meet. He asked to explain. He asked for mercy like it was something owed. I refused. Paula came over that evening. She looked exhausted but resolute. She told me Kevin had finally admitted everything, not out of honesty, but because denial had collapsed. She told me he had begged her to fix things. She told him there was nothing left to fix. We sat in silence for a long time. She asked me one question before she left. She asked if I regretted speaking up when I did. I told her regret only comes from waiting too long. By the end of the second night, 2 relationships were dead, 1 career was collapsing, and a family had permanently shifted. And it was only just beginning. Kevin did not spiral quietly. That would have required self-control, and he had already proven he did not have any. The first sign was the car. I noticed it 2 mornings after the dinner, parked across the street from my house. Not directly in front, but close enough to be intentional. It was his car. I recognized the dent on the rear bumper and the cracked fog light. He sat inside with the engine off, hands on the steering wheel, staring at my front door like it owed him something. I did not go outside. I took a photo from inside the house, not for proof, not for leverage, but because I wanted to remember the look of someone realizing they had lost control of the narrative. He left after 20 minutes. Paula called me an hour later. Kevin had shown up at my parents' house next, shouting on the porch, demanding to see her. My father told him to leave. Kevin refused. The neighbors started watching. That was enough to end the standoff. Kevin left again, humiliated and louder than before. That afternoon, his suspension turned into termination. No press release. No drama. A short meeting, a closed door, and a cardboard box. He called me within minutes of being escorted out, his voice breaking in a way that felt almost theatrical. He said I ruined his life. I told him he had done that himself, and ended the call. Rena made her move that same evening. She came back to the house while I was out, using the spare key she still had. She packed more than clothes this time. She took small things, sentimental things, things that could not be replaced. I did not stop her. I changed the locks as soon as she left. She sent a message afterward accusing me of erasing her existence. I did not reply. By the 3rd day, the story had spread beyond the family. Friends reached out. Some asked questions. Some did not need to. A few tried to stay neutral. Neutrality did not last long once Kevin started talking. He told anyone who would listen that I had always been controlling. He claimed I orchestrated the entire exposure to humiliate him publicly. He implied Rena had been unhappy because I was cold and absent. The problem was consistency. Kevin could never keep his lies straight. Every version of the story contradicted the last. Sometimes the affair was brief. Sometimes it was emotional. Sometimes it was Rena's idea. Sometimes it was mutual. Sometimes I had given permission. Sometimes I was cruel and distant. People noticed. Paula noticed first. She invited him to meet her in a public place, not to reconcile, but to end it cleanly. I did not go. I did not need to. I heard about it afterward. Kevin arrived late. He was agitated, defensive, already angry. He accused Paula of siding with me. He accused her of abandoning him when he needed support. She told him support was not the same as denial. When he realized she would not bend, his anger shifted into something uglier. He threatened to tell people things about her. He threatened to drag her down with him. She stood up and walked away. That night, Kevin showed up at the house again. This time, he knocked hard. I opened the door because I wanted it to be over. He did not look drunk. He looked desperate. His clothes were wrinkled. His face was tight, jaw clenched, eyes darting like he was calculating exits that no longer existed. He accused me of turning everyone against him. He accused me of enjoying it. He accused me of being smug. I told him to leave. He stepped closer instead. I warned him once. He shoved me. That was his last mistake. The altercation was fast, clumsy, and loud. There was no choreography, no dramatic speeches. Just two men colliding in a narrow entryway with years of resentment and fresh betrayal driving every movement. He swung wildly. I blocked, shoved him back, and he stumbled into the doorframe, cracking his elbow hard enough to make him gasp. Neighbors were already coming outside. Someone shouted. Kevin froze, realizing how bad this could get. I stepped back and told him to leave before it escalated further. He did. Police showed up 15 minutes later. A neighbor had called it in as a disturbance. I told them exactly what happened. Kevin was already gone. They took notes and left. The next day, Kevin tried one last angle. He went to my parents. He cried. He apologized. He promised therapy. He promised change. He promised everything people promise when there is nothing left to lose. My parents listened politely. Then my father told him the family business would no longer involve him in any capacity. He told him the separation from Paula would proceed without interference. He told him contact with me was no longer welcome. Kevin left without speaking. Rena's situation collapsed faster. Her workplace found out through overlapping social circles. Not officially. Quietly. People talk. They always do. Invitations dried up. Projects shifted away from her. She tried to explain. It did not matter. She reached out again, this time softer, quieter, almost reasonable. She asked if we could talk, not to reconcile, but to understand. I said no. That refusal broke something in her. She showed up at my office during lunch, standing in the lobby like a ghost that refused to move on. Security asked her to leave. She cried. She accused me of punishing her indefinitely. She accused me of turning the world against her. I never came down. By the end of the week, Paula had moved her things out of the house she shared with Kevin. She stayed with friends temporarily, then with our parents. She filed the paperwork that made the separation real. Kevin tried to contest it. He tried to delay. He tried to negotiate. None of it worked. The family drew a line without drama or ceremony. Kevin was on the other side of it. The final twist came unexpectedly. Kevin's sister reached out to me. She apologized for her brother. She told me he had done this before. Not with family. Not on this scale. But the patterns were familiar. The entitlement. The denial. The implosion when exposed. She asked me not to respond. She said she just wanted me to know I was not imagining anything. That was the last piece I needed, not for validation, but for closure. Kevin was not unlucky. He was consistent. By the end of the third week, the damage was irreversible. 2 relationships destroyed. 1 career ended. 1 family permanently altered. And the silence afterward was louder than any argument. The chaos burned itself out faster than I expected. That was the last surprise. Kevin stopped calling after the police visit. Not because he found dignity, but because there was no one left who would answer. When a person loses access to sympathy, anger, and denial all at once, silence becomes the only option. The house settled into a strange calm. I replaced the locks. I boxed the things Rena left behind and dropped them off through a third party. I canceled the last remaining shared subscriptions. None of it felt emotional. It felt corrective, like straightening something that had been crooked for a long time. Paula moved into a short-term rental across town. She refused to rush anything. She went to work every morning, came home every evening, and built a routine from scratch. The divorce process was quiet, efficient, and merciless in its simplicity. Kevin tried to argue over furniture and shared expenses. He lost every time. He did not have leverage. He had reputation damage, recent termination, and a record of volatile behavior. Those things do not help in negotiations. The family did not fracture loudly. It reorganized. Holidays were adjusted. Seating charts changed. Kevin's name was no longer mentioned unless it was necessary. That happened less and less as weeks passed. Rena's collapse was less contained. She bounced between explanations depending on the audience. Sometimes she was lost. Sometimes manipulated. Sometimes misunderstood. Sometimes betrayed. The inconsistency followed her everywhere. Friends distanced themselves quietly. Invitations stopped coming. Her social world thinned without confrontation. She tried once more to regain footing. She contacted my mother, hoping for sympathy, hoping for mediation. My mother listened carefully, then told her something that ended the conversation permanently. She said love did not survive contempt, and trust did not recover from arrogance. Rena did not call again. Kevin's final attempt to regain relevance came through a mutual acquaintance. He wanted to apologize publicly, to explain himself, to reclaim dignity through visibility. No one supported the idea. Public apologies do not work when everyone remembers the behavior that made them necessary. He moved out of state 2 months later. There was no dramatic goodbye, no final confrontation, just a quiet relocation driven by necessity rather than choice. Paula finalized the divorce shortly after. She kept her name. She kept her savings. She kept her dignity. Kevin walked away with debts, a damaged record, and a reputation that would follow him longer than he expected. I attended the final hearing with her, not as a witness, but as support. Kevin did not look at either of us. He stared at the table while the paperwork erased a decade of marriage in under an hour. When it was over, Paula exhaled slowly and said she felt lighter. Not relieved. Lighter. Rena attempted one last pivot. She enrolled in therapy and announced it publicly, hoping self-awareness would act as a reset. It did not. Accountability requires consistency, not declarations. The attention faded. The narrative did not shift. She moved into a smaller apartment and took on freelance work. Not because she found herself, but because her options narrowed. I did not track her life. I did not need to. My own life stabilized quietly. The house stopped feeling hollow. I rearranged furniture. I changed routines. I reclaimed spaces that had been compromised by memory. Work returned to normal. Sleep came easier. One afternoon, months later, I found the fork. It was under the edge of the cabinet, where it had skidded the night of the dinner. I had missed it during cleaning. I picked it up, rinsed it, and put it back in the drawer. That was the last physical trace of the moment everything changed. The family gathered again that winter. Smaller table. Different energy. No forced smiles. No performances. Paula laughed more easily. My parents looked older, but calmer. The absence was noticeable, but it was not painful. No one spoke about Kevin. No one spoke about Rena. There was nothing left to say. I realized then that revenge had not been loud or clever. It had been immediate, honest, and final. There were no schemes. No long games. Just exposure, boundaries, and refusal to carry someone else's damage. The consequences unfolded on their own. That was the real ending. Not closure. Not forgiveness. Just a life that moved forward without people who proved they did not belong in it.